Well, hey, we'll get moving. If our live streamers are hanging on, I'm triple impressed. Good for you. It's good to have you with us. I don't know who all of you are, but it's good to have you with us nonetheless. All right, let's continue on with your next section here. I'm going to skip this only because this section is the story of how. Do you want to hear the story of how we actually got our leaders involved and what's happened with them since? I don't know if that would help you. Maybe it would help you if you yourself did more of a grassroots effort with developing this culture instead of starting with your leaders first, a top-down approach. I don't know. I can walk you through this really quickly. So, disciple making for us is just really given us not a hyper intensity of individual soul consciousness, but it really does over time train your people to be not merely self-aware, but to be much more aware of the state of somebody else's soul. Christianity happened in a lot of our histories in a hurry. And this is the cosmic slowdown. I will tell you, it is different. That's why I say it's the antithesis of anything fast. It's just it's a slowdown. It's definitely a gradual downshifting, right? Do you remember learning to drive a standard shift car? Right? And, if you thought upshifting was hard, you never thought it was hard until you had to learn to downshift, right? Especially on a slippery road, right? It's a lot easier on an automatic but, you're gonna downshift. Not so much you guys as church planters, but the rest are going to downshift, and your car is going to wiggle, and it's going to feel like you're spinning, and then you'll overcorrect, and you'll make a mistake, and you might run off the road once in a while, right? But it's okay. It's good to learn how to slow down. So God will give you wisdom, and you just can't go fast. Because what you're finding out is you're becoming more soul conscious. What I tell our staff is when we first started off with this, and for a lot of years, we just found out we were trying to disciple big babies. And when I was growing up as a kid and you called someone a big baby on recess, that was never a good thing. That's not the kind of big baby I'm talking about here. You're talking about people that are 30, 40, 50 years old in the Lord that are still babies. But they've been told for years that they're the pillars of the church. It's crazy. You're so thankful for their faithfulness and how they've grown. But they don't know how weak they are until they're connected with someone they have to shepherd. And all that doctrinal download, all that philosophical download, they've never had a place to help. They've never had space in their life. Never had space help create space in their life to let someone else fill that space. We have to take all that doctrinal philosophical download and help someone else live it. So it's just been them. So depending on the kind of church you're going to start this culture in, you have to understand that I think the best way for you to approach this is to assume everyone in the building is kind of like a big baby. And how patient with you are you? How patient are you when you bring a baby home from the hospital? Tendency for pastors of established churches is to assume those who have been there the longest are going to catch on the fastest, and that's often not the case, right? They're scared to death, or they just merely don't think it's something that needs to be done, right? So to me, those are signs of infancy, not maturity. But you have to shepherd them through that. And the best way to shepherd them through that is always make sure you're drawing the circle around your own past so you don't get frustrated, because that's really what you've modeled for them all your life. If you always remember you're not the one that's been doing this, then you'll have patience with them that haven't either. Okay? So you are preparing a nursery not just for newbies coming in. There's a book that I read on disciple making. He said there's new berries and there's old berries. The new berries are the people that just get born again, and the old berries are the ones that have been there for a long time, but they often act like new berries. Right? So just create the nursery and create an environment where everyone could be nurtured very, very slowly. And we did that in our family when we brought our first kid home from the hospital. Right? I know some of you who are older, have kids. Did you have a nursery for your kids when you came home from the hospital? Did you do that? Was it their own room? Okay. We did too. It was just the thing to do, right? So we had an extra room. We just painted it and put new carpet in it and put some wallpaper border up. That's probably not even a thing anymore, is it? Is wallpaper border a thing? See, these young kids like, no, what do you even know what that is? We did a little Noah's Ark theme, and I painted my way. I had my own company through high school and college and seminary, paid my way through all that. And so I'm not allowed not to paint in our house, with my wife knowing that that's a former skill. So we painted it and got the baby furniture, and it's all done before Caleb comes home from the hospital, right? And I'm a little bit of a freak when it comes to sweeping lines in the carpet. I like to see the pattern, and so I'll sweep it over and over and over again. I like it kind of look like an outfield of a professional baseball field. It's got to look good. And you can't do that unless you know how to sweep forward, but especially backwards appropriately, and get the angles, right? So I had all the angles and the nice stripes, and I did it backing out of the room, and really no one was allowed in the room until Caleb came home. And my mom came over one night, wanted to see the nursery, and we took her upstairs, and she started to walk in, and my arm just reflex was just right over the door and blocked her from going in the room. And she goes, "What are you doing?" She goes, I said, "I don't want anyone in the room. Caleb's going to be the first one in this room with Rhonda." She goes, "Well, I can't see the whole thing." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what's around the little corner right there. You don't need to see it." I actually made her cry. I felt really bad about that. But I didn't want any footprints. I didn't want to take time to resweep the room. And I know. Look at these people looking at me like horrible son. She saw 80% of the room. All right, it wasn't that bad. I could have reswept it, I know. So anyways, I apologize later. I still didn't let her in, but I did apologize. So that was Caleb's room, right? We take a lot of care for that, and that's a good thing. We can be overboard with that. But it's okay to rethink things that slowly as you form for the first time, or maybe reacquaint yourself with your original mission statement that actually was a disciple-making mission statement. We just are realizing now maybe how we didn't hit that target along the way. That's all. It's all okay. No one's done anything bad. No one's done anything wrong, right? I think to me it's just good, better, best. If we can do it better or best, then I think we should try. Okay? So for us, our leaders weren't involved. And after a few years, I just basically said in a meeting with them, "Guys, look, a couple of you are, most of you aren't. Are you willing now, having heard testimonies, having watched people disciple each other, are you willing to step out with me now?" And they were all absolutely, of course. So then we just connected them with each other as disciplers. And every time we met, we began praying evangelistically, and then they'd study together and so forth. But some things happen here that I think are pretty interesting. I'll just tell you our story, in case you guys decide to do a grassroots approach to this again instead of a top-down approach. They knew this was our heartbeat. We wanted this to be their heartbeat. In time, instead of letting other people speak up first and what's the good news about the good news testimonies, we began to hear our leaders join in with that. And now when we do them, the leaders lead with that. It took a lot of years, but I think we have 37 deacons and elders, and all 37 of them I could randomly point to and say, Dave, Bob, Matt, what's the good news about the good news? And boom, don't even have to think about it. Now think about that. 20 years ago, they couldn't even give one. It would have been crickets if you asked them, right? 20 years ago in your existence, when you're asking for testimonies, what's the content of those testimonies? Health? Is that what health? God paid a bill I didn't expect. All those things are good. But the nature of testimony time now is different. It's of an eternal nature. And these guys started to do it, and now I start, and they go. And then naturally outside of that, it became a thing. This is an unexpected God-intended blessing. If leaders are leading, other ministry leaders, non-deacon, non-elder people, head of Christian education, head of ushering, head of the head parking lot attendant, if you have one of those, right? The head of your security team. All of the heads of ministry start to catch on by what they see modeled with the pastor and the elders and the deacons, and then they start to speak up. So then it's just kind of like a good watershed issue throughout the whole flock. So that's just kind of what happened in our time, okay? Disciple-making leaders really are no longer interested in deacons meetings or what we called in our area board meetings. Were they ever called board meetings in your neck of the woods? Yeah. Yeah, board meetings, they always bored me, So for me, growing up as a pastor's kid, we just knew every third Thursday night of the month we weren't going to see Dad. Right? From 7:30 to dark 30, he's with the deacons. Right? And we're just not going to see Dad. So we don't see Dad on Mondays because that's his day off, and we're in school. Right? When we're off in the summertime and it's his day off on Monday, he's not spending his day off with us. He's spending his day off with Mom by going somewhere because he needs to just get away, right? So we're just never seeing Dad. And then he teaches, you get door-to-door on Monday, Bible Institute on Tuesday, Wednesday night's prayer meeting, then at least one Thursday night of the month's the board meeting, right? And then we lived in a parsonage next to the church where everyone has full access all the time because everyone knows your address and everyone in town knows that's the preacher's home, right? So you got troubled people in the church, you got drunks from in town, you've got needy people always knocking at your door. So us and Dad, I already went through that yesterday. And praise God how my dad changed and all that throughout the years. But nonetheless, guys now, as they grew into what understanding disciple making was, this was what an unexpected God-intended blessings, and I'm just going to say it, I don't expect you to understand it. Disciple making churches, we go from that 20% doing 80 to 80% doing 100. So when I was growing up, your deacons were part of that 20% that did all the work. So they got burnt out. They had marriage struggles. They had kids struggles. And that was just part of doing ministry. It's part of sucking it up, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And the most important people in your life could become expendable because we were doing God's will. And that never made sense to me as a kid, especially as a kid in seminary. Never made sense to me at all. Why is anyone in God's family made expendable because we have to do ministry this way? That was just bazonkers to me. So anyways, as I become the pastor at Grace, it's still 20 doing 80, and then we're learning this all along the way, and then we start at grassroots, and all of a sudden, all these people involved with disciple making at the grassroots level, all of them want to serve somewhere. So we're going from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50% of the congregation serving faithfully in one area. And then it goes to 60%. About 60%, the elders and deacons realize, oh, wow, we're getting helped a lot. We can actually not have board meetings anymore. Right? And now we've probably got over 90% of our membership serving faithfully in at least one area. And no one's taxed. No one's taxed at all. So we don't have to have board meetings. We don't have to have deacons meetings anymore. When I meet with the elders, when Pastor Hobie meets with the deacons, it's primarily what's the good news about the good news and a few FYI things about what God's people are doing in their service. And the deacons oversee the financial and physical part, but it's primarily they're overseeing disciple-making people who are doing that work. And then they report in the deacons meeting that work's getting done, and then we just shepherd each other. It's different. It's a different kind of meeting now. And the elders' meetings are the same with me. We start with what's good news about the good news, and then basically elders shepherd. They have the pastor-teacher gift, and we talk about who they're shepherding, who's shepherding them. And we'll talk about primarily people. We'll talk about someone who's a non-elder who's discipling someone, and they came to a crisis, and they came to an elder about that crisis, and the elder really didn't have the wisdom, so he brings it to the body of elders, and we talk about it together and give him information to take back to that person. So the whole time is just really talking about soul development. It's just different. I don't know what to tell you. Church budgets are, I guess they're necessary, but they're just so simply put together. They're not rocket science at all. So we don't have to talk about that anymore. I don't know. So it did restructure our leaders' meetings. We're praying now more. We're praying over people that are involved with disciple making more. The nature of our meetings when we do get together has changed. I've already explained that. So this is just how it looks at Grace now. This may not be anything big to you guys, but it was big to us because this is not what we ever were. Right? So the deacons report about physical work being done. They don't sit there and talk about it all the time. They're just reporters. Because we're just involved. I don't know how to tell you guys this, but where we're at now, we actually have to make sure we schedule the deacons' meetings to make sure that we have them. Because no one sees a need for them. I don't know how to explain that. Everything was so form over function before. Form over disciple-making function. It's nice to know that you struggle to have the meetings because you don't need the meetings. Because everyone's just soul conscious. And then things just get done. No one bats 1,000. You don't, we don't. But one of the unexpected God-intended blessings of a disciple-making culture is people get older and they retire. Like, we're in the buckle of the snow belt in Northeast Ohio, and we only have one snowbird couple, and that's because their parents need their help, lived in Arizona, but now both parents have passed away, and this year they stayed. You know, we have one other couple. The lady has a chronic illness, and their doctor has pretty much ordered her. In Lake County, we only have 7 cloudless days a year. And like for my wife that has had surgery, The part of her intestines that they took out before they did the reconnection was the only part of the intestines that absorbs vitamin B12 and vitamin D. And so she struggles, so she has to get intravenously vitamin B12 once a month, and then she has to get vitamin D. How? Primarily. So you ain't getting that in Lake County. I mean, we're like Seattle, Washington, you know? So I can remember after her surgery, the doctor told us, he showed us pictures of what they took out and why, what's part of the intestines. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, folks. There's a part of the intestines this big. That's the only part that absorbs B12. Well, that's gone now. This part absorbs vitamin D. And he goes, if you love your wife, you're going to get your wife to the Arizona or Florida 4 weeks, a month every winter. He said, if you really love your wife. And I just started laughing. Because back when the surgery was like, dude, I can't even take a vacation for a week. I don't have the money, don't have the time. So I was laughing. And he goes, it's offensive to me that you're laughing. And I was just like, it's like getting scolded in class, right? It's like the leading colorectal surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic, right? He's just like, it's offensive to me you're laughing. He goes, I'm telling you, you don't love your wife if you don't get her to 4 weeks of consistent sun. And so anyways, why am I saying all this? Thank you. People don't like to leave who they're being shepherded by, and they can't imagine leaving someone they're shepherding. What's happening with our older people is the same thing that's happening with our college kids. You used to have 45 to 55 college kids going off to Christian colleges every year. This last year, we didn't have any. I have Christian college presidents, my alma mater and others, calling me saying, what are you doing? I'm not kidding you. What are you doing? I was like, I don't know. We haven't changed anything except these kids can't imagine leaving because that relationship. But now in our high school and our college and career, we probably have the most stable, godly young people that we've ever had. And it's hard to explain that to Christian institutionalists who are wonderful people. That's their mission in life, is to be the arm of the home, right? And I get all that. I can't help what's happening. We didn't tell them to stop going. We've never had one of those conversations. So disciple-making people just like to stay connected. And now, one of the unexpected God-intended blessings is also they're not only staying home so they can disciple and be disciple makers, and they have redemptive relationships in town where people aren't saved yet, and they're burdened for them. They can't imagine leaving them. They have more time because they're not working. So they take that 1 or 2 areas of service before they retire, and now they've got all this expendable time and energy. And so there's this group that's formed at our church. I had to give it a name. I like to give everything biblical names, right? So instead of a general fund, right, we call it the eternal fund. Don't talk to me about a general fund. That's just boring to me. It's just a budget. Why are we doing what we're doing? Give it even our budget a why, right? So we formed what's called an A and P team. Aquila and Priscilla team. I just looked at what they were to the Apostle Paul in the early days of the advancement of the gospel, and they took as professional people, owners of a tent-making company. They traveled that company to go assist ministry, and I think that's what these people were doing. So we have over 35 now semi-retired or fully retired people on campus all week long, serving the Lord, and they save us over $100,000 a year in our budget. Right? But what do they primarily do? They're disciple makers. They're not traveling to the south for the winter. Okay? And some of them, like me and my wife, particularly my wife, some of them have been ordered by their doctors to go. And they're not. Is that good or bad? I don't know. They just can't imagine leaving. To me, those are the soldiers of ministry. I don't know. We can argue about that all day long. But these people, as a matter of fact, some of these guys are in so much pain, they went out and they developed their own t-shirt. A group of the men of the Aquila and Priscilla, they developed their own t-shirt. And I was walking around the church one day and I saw this t-shirt and I just started laughing. I said, Tony, where in the world did you get that shirt? And he goes, well, we designed it. Who's the we? Oh, he goes, the guys in the A&P group, because we're all hurting all winter long. And it was called, they call themselves the Sons of Ibuprofen. They designed their own t-shirt, they got them printed up, and they wear them. Now the women are wearing them, the daughters of ibuprofen. So this is I can't make this up. They did it. But they're just sweet, godly, disciple-making people. And but anyways, it really came together when the leaders were taking the lead. We used to have an annual deacon elder questionnaire, and the nature of that has even changed now from being more structural and whatnot, more corporate to more disciple making in its intention. But once a year we all fill this out, and it primarily is a story about our disciple making life in the past year and what are our disciple making goals for the next year. Right? And that's what that is. Right? So we keep each other accountable to the evangelism, discipleship, and service at Grace Church of Mentor in that order. And it's good. Keeping everything attached to that clothesline, this illustration we gave before, is a healthy thing for our churches. All right, we went through this yesterday, our spiritual, remember we jumped ahead. If you're here today and you did not get one of these roadmaps, you can raise your hand and we'll get one to you. Anyone need one? All right. Here you go. All right. Let me see here. I wish I was that good. I think if it was a playing card, I could probably do it. Right. Here you go. So basically what this is, and I don't know if that was explained or not, basically what it is, we've written or provided for our people. Like if I led you to Christ after working at the landscaping company together for 10 years, my pastor would have provided for us what I'm going to study with you for the rest of our lives, from milk to meat and everything in between. So my goal is to win one. God may let me win more. He may not let me win any. But if you get saved, my pastor is going to create a space and a time and the resources so that we can sit and study the Word together. And that's what that is. Okay? So it's not, again, just a book or a series of books or a class. It's a life. And that's in version 6 or 7.0 right now. We're still adding to that. And that whole thing's going to be put, God willing, within this year on a digital format where everyone has access to everything. Okay? So again, this is just the sections of that. You can open it up and take a look. The third major arrow over. We make it green. We have a little tree in the backdrop for a reason. Right, so it always looks organic and growing. The arrows, if you notice, are stepping up. That's the growth in Christ-likeness. Trying to give it optics and words so our people understand the heartbeat of things. Those are the four major areas we said yesterday in which people struggle. And we formed material around people's biggest struggles to help them so they can help each other. Okay? And this is what our Aquila and Priscilla group really focuses on. Your 1 degree is some discipleship material. Now that they're towards the sunset years of their life and they're occupationally done, this Dave Jewett's material is a fantastic tool to help your people who are retirement age sit down together in a group and figure out their laser-focused service purpose in their life. And it's just really a fascinating practical study to go through. Dave's a businessman. God's given him a real tremendous, he's got his own website with daily devotionals. But this particular study was excellent. After our senior saints went through it a handful of years ago, our young married class wanted to go through it because they said, well, we want to know how to prepare to plan for when we're retired here. How can we begin to get focused when we're retired? And they're in their 20s, right? So we went through it in our young marrieds class. It is a great exercise to help people focus practically on what their laser focus in ministry through service can be as they remain disciple makers. This Aquila and Priscilla team, I told you about that. And Jude, along with Tony, we put together a little study on Titus 2 a few years back and took our folks through that. That's available to them if they want to learn what a Titus 2 person's purpose is in the church. Okay? So as their disciple makers, and this was another unexpected God-intended blessing, and it happened with this new couple I talked to you about a couple Wednesday nights ago that came from another church. They were in marriage struggles, and they wanted to have a couple mentor them, right? So I introduced them to a couple just a little bit older than them, and then the girl just goes, you know what, can we have a spiritual mom and dad too? I mean, they just upchuck this. A lot of young people do. So right away, so here's a couple that's got a young married couple that's going to disciple them, but they want a Titus 2 couple to come alongside to learn from as well. And praise God. So it doesn't take a nanosecond to look across the lobby and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, come on over. I'd like you to meet someone. And every time I do that, our people know what that means. Right? So I haven't had any rejections yet or people pretending to me like they didn't hear me. Because, you know, so Bob and Linda came over and introduced them to this couple, and they're loving on them. So that's another creative morphing of discipleship. And it's a beautiful thing, right? Because it's a biblical thing. And what are the older women in the church supposed to teach the younger women in that text? Do you remember? How to be lovers of their Jude and lovers of their children and keepers at home. Is that practical? Absolutely. Can someone, what's an older woman or older man in that context? That would have been anyone 60 or more in age, 60 years old or older, right? Well, if their discipling couple is not that age, they really don't have much to say to them about how to live that part of their life the wisest, right? I'm 54, right? I don't have any wisdom to share with anyone in our church much, like those people do, right? So young people, if they're spirit-filled and they're disciple-making people, they're craving that kind of influence in their life, you know, more and more, and that's a good thing. So their disciplers don't feel put off. It's actually a welcome addition. Come on in, come on over, right? I can answer them, but I don't think I can answer them as good as you can. And what was really interesting as this is fleshing out, none of our old people feel capable to do this, right? Anyone over 60 is kind of like, oh, Pastor, I can't teach anyone anything. Oh, well, I'm not asking you to. This is not a classroom, right? This is a life question, right? You've already climbed this mountain and you're standing at the top, right? And we're still scraping our shins climbing up this mountain, and we need your help, right? The people we're climbing with actually want your help for us. So that's a good thing. I think it should happen more and more and more. So this Titus 2 is some material that helps our people figure that out more and more. I have 3 Titus 2 couples in Rhonda and I's life in our church, okay? We both have disciplers. I have people that disciple me, and I disciple people, and I have Titus 2 people in my life too, okay? They walk with us through life, right? If the pastor's not going to do it, the people aren't going to do it. And pastors say, I don't have anyone to disciple me in my church. No one has who's going to help me. And just remember, it's not the degrees on the wall, right? It's not the Bible knowledge intellectually. It's the maturity in how they live life, right? And the people that are best the people who are best to disciple you are not the people who walk in your life and say, I need to disciple you. The best people who disciple you is for you to go to ones that feel like they're never capable to do that. Right? And that's the person you can learn from their life. Instead of, we don't need any more tellers in the church. You need to do this. You. We need listeners, and we need lovers, and we need learners, and we need worshipers. Right? Church has had enough of tellers. Right? We need people who can be good at relationships towards Christ likeness. And so pastors, there's probably that guy in your church, and he might not be a deacon, he might not be a leader, but you need to invite that guy into your life, okay? And you need to meet with them at least on a quarterly basis. It doesn't have to be every week. The older guys in my life, we just pick books to read, and we read books, and we get together, and in the context of reading those books to add to our pathway, we have personal conversations, and we're texting and calling all the time about personal things. We just went through one really difficult thing last week in our family, so I called up my Titus 2 guy. I said, look, dude, I need help. This is way too heavy for me to carry alone, so... and he was right there. He was right there. He always is. Okay? Comments or questions? Yes, sir.
When people in your church are asked from people outside of your church, what do you do here? What is their response?
Yeah, I mean, it's growing more and more just to be a disciple-making response, really. Like Al Smetana, for years, he was one of those 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. Al pretty much lived at the church when I was growing up. He lost his daughter over that, Amy. So Al's been with us through this whole journey of changing. Al was the deacon that kept the budget together. He kept the tools together in the shed. He kept the lawnmower maintenance. He did mow the lawn. All the building maintenance records. He was probably the most copious note taker and logger of different things that I've ever seen in my life. And the neatest handwriting, too. And he was loyal. But I tell you what, he was like my dad's shadow. So my dad lost my sister, and he lost his daughter, and that's all about the time we're figuring all this out, you know. And so now if you ask Al, what do you do here? What do you think Grace is all about? On a Sunday morning in his 70s now, he would say, well, I could tell you what it used to be, but you'll find him at a Sunday school sitting out in the lobby discipling a man every week, right? He goes, this is what it's about for me now. That's probably the biggest pendular swing I can think of in our church. Is Al Smetana. I would hope that everyone at Grace would be, I think we're close. You know, if you saw our choir director, Ben, he's got his master's degree from Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. He's a pretty good musician. Pretty good choir director, and top of the crop. He's pretty much known in the area as being a pretty good choir conductor, and I think he's even taken some kind of Lake County or Lakeland adult. okay? And he's just good at what he does. And, you know, you would expect, if you ask that guy, what does he do at Grace Church of Mentor, you would expect him to say, oh, I'm the music guy, and I lead the choir. That's my ministry. And I don't think you're going to hear that from Ben or his wife, Julie. You know what I mean? Ben's going to say, well, there's Jim, you know, Overberger there. I disciple Jim. We've been doing this for about 8 years. His wife doesn't know the Lord yet, so we pray for his wife, and then we study God's Word together. And my goodness, it took him 10 years of prayer, public prayer, evangelistically, for his students at Willoughby South High School, where he's acquired Willoughby East Lake School System. Took him 10 years of public prayer for him before he saw one student come to know Christ as their Savior. You're not allowed to talk about it, but if a student comes and asks you, you can have a conversation, right? And Haley did. It was her senior year, and Haley got saved, and then a couple weeks later, Haley led her boyfriend Gage to Christ. So after 10 years, Ben's got, right? And so Gage is going off to the military, right? So they get married. Ben and Julie still disciple them, even though they're down in the southeast in the military. And then Ben has another student come to know Christ as her Savior, Colleen, is it? She's a great musician, teaching school, I think, in music, if I'm not mistaken. And so she's got a team of disciplers around her, seeking to reach other lost people. Yeah, I would say that's the answer you would get from Ben. Yeah. We have elders that are pretty astute and good at what they do, right? And I would say that those guys are about the same way. They know what's most important, and they keep going at it. Whether it be Ron and Jan Hart, they're discipling several young married couples right now. Our Cleveland Institute of Music kids. It's very hard to get into the Cleveland Institute of Music. I think there's 3 major schools of music in the country. One's, I think, in New York, California, and Cleveland. So they have, I think they have over, Amara was telling me they have, maybe it was Sam Sykes. Sam was saying, I think they have over 500, 600 applicants a year to the Cleveland Institute of Music, or maybe it was 5,000 or 6,000, I don't know. 5,000 or 6,000 probably. And they take 50. What is? Yeah, it's like super, super middle. So the kids that get in here are just stupid good at music. I mean, they're just like, and the Cleveland Orchestra is the most renowned orchestra globally. And all these kids, they don't get in unless they have a chance at auditioning for the Cleveland Orchestra. And the Lord's given us, they're all transient because they come and go, but right now, how many do you think we have? 10, 15? Yeah. No. Praise God. This kid won a global trumpet competition. And it wasn't just for trumpets. This was a global competition of music excellence among all instruments. And he just won it last year, and he just won this fellowship, so he's staying over. Oh my goodness. Yeah, these kids are really, really. But if you get these kids together, some got saved. Sasha got saved through the disciple-making influence. And he was discipled very intensely, and then took a music grad position at Rice University in Houston. But right away, what does he want to do? Does Arch Ministries have a disciple-making church in Houston? And we just helped plant a church down there 5 years ago. So he's now in Will Cover's church there at Arise Baptist Church, really close to downtown Houston and Rice University. And I was down there for their 5th anniversary about a few weeks ago. And Sasha's there, right as rain, playing his instrument and enjoying the fellowship. He's the family. That's this family now. And Will's getting this disciple-making thing, and so Sasha's involved in helping him develop that culture and that small church plant. It's just pure. It's just pure, you know. It was really pure because Sasha and I went to In-N-Out Burger that night after church, which make it a God's will thing for sure. So, Yeah, so I would say that even for our CIM students, our elders, that our CIM students come some saved from other churches. Lizzie, the girl you're discipling from Texas, comes to Grace, never knew disciple making. Jude's her discipler and soaking up the word, Are they engaged yet? They are. No, Vincent, not yet. He's a little slow popping the question. This summer. But Vincent's there. He's a trombone. She's French horn. They've fallen in love. They've never been discipled before, so they hunker down. And so the best future musicians of the world are in our church for a short time, coming from churches that didn't have disciple making, and they get there, they don't want to leave because they've never had it. And so they value that more than they value their position in the music world. That blows my mind. So story after story, it's not everybody. I would say everyone's growing there, but a really healthy handful of people know why they're even existing now, why they're even on earth, breathing still. Yeah. All right, you had a question about 5 minutes ago. So,
kind of thinking back to when you were sharing about your own discipler relationships at church, how would you counsel a pastor and wife who think it unwise or maybe even wrong to have those very individualistic discipleship relationships with people at church, let alone, even for themselves within the church? And
can you rephrase your question?
I feel like there was kind of like a branch of pastors who were taught, even in seminary, don't have close relationships within your church.
I gotcha. Okay.
So how do you counsel them when they think it's almost wrong to do that, whether it's discipling somebody like for life?
I get your restatement, because we were taught the same thing. My dad was taught the same thing at Moody, but this is how we were taught. So I'll just speak for our space in which we were taught. We were taught not to have special friendships. We were taught that by people that had no idea what disciple making was in the local church. Right? So I watched this as a kid growing up when my parents, back in the day, Chuck and Cheryl Carafa meant a lot to my parents. And so my parents would take little weekend trips with them, right? And they would be seen out to dinner with them. When my parents went out of town, we would go to the Carafa's house. Our families were tight, right? And I can remember as a kid sitting in the pews, hearing other women, right, intrinsically nosy people saying, well, Pastor and Judy have never been out to dinner with me with that before, So I get that. That's a friendship that's not disciple making in its intentions. The nature of a disciple making relationship is different than that, right? And so it's also different in how it fleshes itself out, because it's not just my parents and Chuck and Cheryl. You see, in a disciple-making world, my parents would have people discipling them, and they were discipling Chuck and Cheryl would have someone they would be discipling. And then that goes up and down and out. So it can never be exclusively Bob and Judy and Chuck and Cheryl. It can't be, if you understand the full girth of this organic thing. It's never going to be exclusively one-on-one or just us four and no more. So I don't know of any. Jude's here. I hope she can come to all of these to kind of be a backup reference, but I don't know of anyone at Grace struggling with another two people or two couples that are becoming too exclusive with each other in friendship. If you ask me, do I have any really good friends at Grace Church of Mentor, like besties? I would say no. I grew up with Pastor Kent, our associate pastor, since kindergarten. We're the same age, right? same Christian school together, same Christian college together. We're separate for 10 years in ministry. He was a Christian school teacher, realized he had a pastor-teacher gift. The church that he was at, the pastor told him he didn't have it, which blew us away. And he says, I can't pursue what I desire here. And then he came to Grace, and we certainly saw that he had it. So we developed them. So anyways, they've been at Grace for over 20 years now, he and Gloria. Gloria grew up 15 miles south of where my wife grew up in Indiana. She was Anderson, Rhonda was Muncie. They knew each other. They did cheerleading stuff together in high school, kind of rival schools. So he's my best friend since kindergarten, and her and Rhonda are tight, but we've never taken a trip together. We're really good friends, but we're not besties in an exclusive sense, right? So I don't know how to explain that. I get your question, and I saw it. We were taught the same thing, but we were taught that in a context of the understanding of relationships, and its very nature was different than what we have now. Because I still agree with that. I don't believe pastors should have besties in the church. That's my personal conviction. I think many do, and I think those pastors haven't maybe stopped and thought for a little bit about how other people are hurt by that. My mom and dad had the gift of hospitality, and I know this is maybe I'm hypersensitive in this regard, but my mom and dad had the gift of hospitality. Another thing I would hear as a PK sitting in the pews was, well, Pastor and Judy have had them over for dinner, but they've never had us. And I can remember this one particular old lady in particular. She would just sit there and name off she was keeping a list of all the people that my mom and dad had, but they hadn't been invited yet. And I kind of get that. So I told Rhonda when they asked me to be the pastor, I remember all these things. It's PTSD from being a PK, right? All these years, right? So like why I'm still going to be a pastor teacher after all I've seen and heard, I have no clue, but we're going to do this thing. I said, but if we're going to do this thing, we're never going to have that said about us. And she goes, what do you mean? And I said, we're going to have the whole church over to our house for dinner once a year. I said, I'm not going through that. I'm not going to unnecessarily divide my flock over that kind of stuff. And so we developed what's called Picnic at the Potters. And we have the whole church over to our house once a year for dinner. So no one's ever going to be able to say, I've never been to Pastor Tim's house for dinner. Right? Now, that's one of the last reasons why we did it. But our house and our property is not very big, but we have a big school behind us with a big soccer field. And we have a gracious neighbor that owns quintuple the amount of land that we do, and he lets us inhabit that. And the school lets us park cars back in the field, and we rent bounce houses and set up volleyball and horseshoes. And this year we have a guy coming to our church that owns a farm, and he's gonna do a pig roast for the whole church at our house. That's your secret and my secret, unless anyone from our church is live streaming and you did not hear that. It's going to be a surprise. Yeah, but Scott's going to do a pig roast for us. Well, you know what? We might run out of parking if that word gets out, right? So, yeah, we have anywhere between 400 to 600 people over at our house every year. It's great fun. A lot of disciplers with disciplees hanging out, fellowshipping. And I just want everyone to know they're all welcome. So, but I get that, and that is a very real thing, and I still think it is a real thing. It'd be a hard thing for you guys, because especially if you're going to plant with another couple that's close by, you guys will just have to, you'll just have to be careful that as more and more people come, you're spreading your influence. It's probably a little bit more delicate in what you guys are going to do. So I'm all for close friends. Years ago, it was Tom and Lisa Bonham and me and Rhonda were the only young couples in the church. We had 3 teenagers. We were averaging about 80 to 90 people on a Sunday morning. And Rhonda and I went there with no other young couples in the church. And we weren't even on the payroll, right? We weren't even part of the budget for 2 years, right? I was bivocational at Grace for 18 years. So money was never an issue for me. I just wanted to do ministry, right? So Tom and Lisa and I, we got close. Our kids were close. But then the Lord brought Herb and Laura Hotchkiss. And then he brought right on their heels Eric and Patsy Hickson. And so all of a sudden we grow by 300% in our young marrieds group. And the time that we spent with Tom and Lisa, because her dad was a pastor in Dayton for years, she understood the close friendship thing. And what could have been very hurtful for them wasn't, because her dad was a pastor. And then Herb and Laura, they actually took us out to dinner one night, and they said, we want to be your best friends. And they really wanted to pour their hearts into us. And I was in school with Herb, and Rhonda was with Laura, and we knew each other. Herb was actually in my prayer group at school, and God just led him to mentor somehow. Cleveland Marshall Law School. He went to law school there. And he was with us, and they took us out just sincere as sincere can be. We want to be your best friends to encourage you, because we know how hard ministry can be. And I can remember telling him, I thought, I was green as green eggs and ham. I remember telling him, I said, Herb, we just can't do that. And this is why. I told him my parents' history, and he understood. So I said, what we can do is the couples that we have now, we can do something with this, So they ended up becoming really, really close friends with Eric and Patsy, right? Herb and Laura, he took a law office job in Western New York, then Detroit, now they're in Atlanta, and the other couples are still with us 30 years later, right? So, yeah, I get it. It's a fine balance, but I don't know if I even answered your question. You look like you have a follow-up.
It's kind of more like a conflation of discipleship and the amount of time you need to spend with that one or two people, and even just kind of the concern of the time spent with those certain people.
Okay.
It's not a concern we have. It's more as we're sharing the discipleship church culture
Sure.
with others, this is going to be something that we've already run into with other pastors
Yes.
as a reason why this isn't good for the church.
Yes.
That's more, I think, what she was trying to ask.
I would tell them, if I was in your shoes, I would tell them, we understand your concern. And really a disciple-making model answers that concern. Because no one should be hungering for besties in a disciple-making reality. Because while they may be spending the majority of their time with certain people, doing life together, that arm of the church never acts independently of the body. Disciple-making people don't, if they're genuine in their intentions, disciple-making people never want to be disjointed or dismembered from the body in their exclusivity of their relationship. The stronger they grow together in Christ's likeness, the more they want to be part of the body. They want to know more about the body. They want to be part of what the body's doing as we pursue the glory of the church, which is the head of the church, Jesus. So there's that unexpected God-intended blessing of what disciple-making is, where that concern just becomes a distant concern in light of that kind of reality. All I can tell you is we just have not had that conversation for a long, long time at Grace, because people are spending a lot of time. You spend a lot of time with Miriam, and you spend a lot of time with Lizzie, but you're still really a significant part of the body, all three of you, right? So I don't know that, but that doesn't mean you're not growing closer to each other, right? But it's just an organic growing together in that way. All right? Comments or questions? I will tell you I need to be in Ames, Iowa by 5 o'clock. So you said it's an hour and a half? Okay. So there's a girl that my daughter won to Christ 2 weeks before she left for school last fall. She ran track with her at Spire Institute. And Marika Mendezun is her name. You want to pray for her if you have any spare prayer time. Or if you know of anyone in Ames that can help me disciple her, I would really appreciate that. Marika got wonderfully saved 2 weeks before she left, and her brother is a linebacker there at Iowa State, and I guess I really didn't realize how close Des Moines was. I'm going down to Des Moines to do the seminar for the next 2 days, and I guess Ames is not far from there, so I'm going to go over and have dinner with Marika and her brother tonight. And my son's transferring from Ohio State in football. He put in his name in the transfer portal on Saturday. And the first school to call him was Iowa State. So the coach wants to meet me tonight. And I'm going to have dinner with Marika and her brother. And I'm just telling you that to give myself a hard stop so it's not abrupt to you guys. Marika, boy, it's a tricky one. I tried to put it in my phone, and my phone argued with me. It's Marikajke, I believe. And it's Mendezun. It's Mendazon, I believe. If you Google it, you might be able to find her brother on the roster to get the exact proper spelling of the last name. But fascinating story there. Emma meets her in track, starts to witness to her. Emma and I get together with her. She trusts Christ as her Savior. We start discipleship. But we only had 2 weeks with her before she left for school. So on campus, the most influential group to reach out to her, this is bizarre to me because it's typically not the case in schools, is a Catholic group. And you know, she doesn't, we only have but 2 weeks for her before she goes, and that's the first group to latch on to. So she's still growing, she's still working through the foundations books and so forth, but holding on to her is this Roman Catholic group of really loving kids. And so I've got to walk her through that. But she's a sweetheart. The pastor that was here we were eating lunch with mentioned that. Yeah, if you can get me connected with that somehow, and maybe a single girl, a college girl that really loves the Lord, that's I don't know. Mark Wood? Okay. Good. Yeah, I'm gonna tell her tonight over dinner that I have someone with her to meet with, and I think I can get her to do that. I don't know. God's got to do a work there. So, no, she's the only one in her family. Her dad's a very well-known orthopedic surgeon, actually foot surgeon in Northeast Ohio, and probably the best of the best in that area. So, anyways. Her brother reached out to my son. The coaches have gotten wind of the connection, and they're trying to get Noah to come up. So the coach got their son to call Noah last night, and then Marika's dad texted me this morning and said, "Hey, I hear you're in Iowa." And so God's doing something in the whole mix of this thing. Yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah, they're trying to get him up for an official visit even this weekend, yeah. Yeah, Noah will be here probably this week or next. We'll see. We'll see. I don't even know why I was telling you. I think it's telling you how much time I had left. So 3:30, right? We were supposed to be done by what today? 2:30 or 3? 3? All right, we can do that. All right, let's go on in this part of our notes, and anything that you wanted to ask that you haven't asked, you can still ask, even though we're moving on. Everything's fair game, so don't worry about that. If you want any more flesh and blood put on this thing, I would encourage you, if you've already gotten something started, or even if you will, I would encourage you to get up for an advanced disciple-making seminar and mentor. That's where we really fine-tooth comb things and work through some initial hurdles that your church runs into with this. So we have one in October in Mentor. It's on the website. You can register for that. Come and see us. You're going to need more help. That's all I'm saying. COVID put a hiccup in everyone's world that was trying to get started, and now you feel like you got to start all over. I get that, but as you continue, I think the advanced would be really helpful for you. You get to intermingle with our people more, see our people, talk through it with other ministry leaders that are experiencing similar struggles and so forth. So what we did was, remember years ago I said we built a clothesline, and the clothesline was a disciple-making mission statement, and we do everything in our church to attach it to the mission statement. So one of the practical ways we did that was not only with a mission statement and attaching ministry function to that mission statement, we also took our budget. And I said, guys, I really think it's necessary for us to make sure that we're putting God's dollars to God's mission. Because I grew up in a Christianity that had a lot of form over function. And when you're a programmatically driven church and an institutionally driven church, you're not necessarily a flesh and blood, but you're a brick and mortar church. So what we got to do is even take the dollars and cents that God's people are giving, which are His, and make sure that they're being funneled into this eternal purpose. So I told you what our mission statement was before, and so I told the guys, I said, let's take our budget. And the first year I was the pastor in 2006, I said, let's take 5 years to make sure that our budget looks like our mission statement. So we took each line item of the budget, and we put a G by it, right, for glory. And we put an E1 by what was evangelism. We put an E2 by what was equipping. So if there were other line items that didn't fit glory, evangelism, or equipping, that we put a question by it. Does it need to be moved up into one of those, or does it need to be deleted? Because we're going to do things according to God's mission, even God's dollars and cents. All right? So you might think that's a really weird exercise, blah, blah, blah. But remember, we've been in a budget deficit since 1948 at the end of every year through 2005. We finished 2005 with a $27,000 deficit in our budget. This is not a church growth seminar or a budget seminar. I'm just trying to tell you how writing the philosophy of your church, unexpected God-intended blessings happen even practically in just about every facet of your church. So we did this, and for us, we exist to glorify God. You can define the glory of God however you wish. I think it's certainly, including maybe more, but it certainly is the expression of, or the brilliance of, the sum total of both the attributes of His greatness and His goodness. For us, Jesus Christ is the glory of God. So He's the head of the church. And the Word of God gives us what's necessary for the function of the church. And it certainly is a saved, gifted people. So to be able to congregate and worship with integrity together. So for us, we want to glorify God, but you've got to have people and places to meet. Whether that, you got to have pastor teachers. I don't think you can have a church without having a pastor teacher. I don't believe that people plant churches. I believe churches plant churches. So we want to make sure that we have a pastor teacher and we have a saved, regenerate congregation membership, and we want to make sure that they have a place to meet. The body's got to gather. Don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. So whether that's underneath the shade of a tree, or whether that's in a shed, or someone's garage, or someone's basement, or any kind of pole barn you want to throw up, you got to have people, you got to have gifted leadership, and you got to have place. So glory for us is people and places. It's people and places. So if, as we went through our line items of our budget, it was about people or places that were essential to the function of the church, we put a G by it. Evangelism and equipping was easy, right? It's either about outreach or it's about training. That was easy. Okay? But we did realize that we were pretty upside down on some things. And we'll explain that here as we go on. But when we did this, by the end of 2006, so we're heading into the 2006-2007 budget year, for the first time in our church's history since 1948, all right, we finished with a $27,000 deficit. We finished with a $32,000 surplus. And we all just kind of sat back after that first year, looking in the rearview mirror, and this 5-year goal, trying to match our budget to our mission statement, where it's like, wow, did God even use that? So I'm just not trying to be spooky or mystical, but there's a lot of different things that God did to show us that the church functioning unto Christ's last words being our first command was our obligation. And when he saw us trying to do that with wisdom, it's like the Spirit of God got behind that. And what does the Spirit of God do? What's the purpose for his existence? There's a lot, but he was really interested in the promotion of the Son and the ministry of the Son, right? So that's what he did. It's been that way ever since. Whatever we face in the future, I don't know, but it seems that God blessed it, okay? So that's what we did. 3 parts to the budget. Glory is people and places. Evangelism, we kind of looked at evangelism according to the 3-piece prophecy pie of Acts 1:8. I know it's a prophecy, right? You will be my witnesses, remember, in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and uttermost parts of the earth. This is how my brain thinks, so this is what we did. All right? We put an E1 by it if it's evangelism, right? But we put by it a J1 or JS, Judea and Samaria, or a U, uttermost parts, by that line item. Just telling you what we did. We're green still. We're working towards the whole church being brought together an organic whole unto living for eternal purposes, and we felt that what people gave in offerings was an essential part of that. Okay? And then everything that was equipping, from our Bible Institute to our Sunday school classes and Bible studies, everything in between. Everything was about teaching, we put an E2 by it. Okay? Yes. We are every year pulling back more and more on, we're actually putting together kind of like a final presentation now to our people. We're pulling back more and more on undesignated giving. On designated giving. Because if what we're doing is all about eternal purpose, why do we have to have special offerings? Why do we have to make it that complicated? It does, but it's, no, 100%, no, 100%, 100%. You're absolutely right. But it's easier even in a spiritual sense, not just a practical sense. Because it takes the old-fashioned brick and mortar church budget and it puts flesh and blood all over it. Right? So we don't have to pay an electric bill just so we can have lights on. Even paying an electric bill is tied to an eternal purpose, because when we get together, that's what we're doing. Right? Everything's necessary unto eternal purpose in developing disciple makers. So we've been pulling back on that, and this year is going to be the final adjustment to that. And our flock will have an adjustment with that. But it's even, the optic of our budget's even going to be different than what you're going to see here in a second. We still do. We still do. And even in this new way, we still will. It's going to look different, right? I think the optic of this is everything. If you put this, was what we're planning on doing. This is what I've suggested to them, and I think they're mulling over it. If we put our mission statement at the top of our budget, that's on paper, right? And our mission statement, that's our eternal purpose, right? And now here is our disciple-making lifestyle. This is the body life of the church, not the individual, the body life of the church. Then everything underneath there supports that. Right? So it's going to be, instead of line items, I think it's going to be more drop downs. Just for the optic, to help people understand that every time they give, it's not just to keep the lights on or to paint the building. There's something way bigger than all this. Right? So our graphics people will work on the optic of it. I'm just trying to get everyone to understand that we live and breathe for a why. And when we get together, it's just not going through the motions. We get together because we're living towards a mission, and we're always organically helping each other towards that mission. So I'm just trying to give an optic of that. This is where we've come so far. And disciple makers, they do love to grow in ministry mission, and they love to figure this out. We just got to do it in a way that's, I think the new way we're going to do it's a whole lot less confusing, and it's a whole lot more communicable. Because right now, you have a hard time getting people interested in your general fund budget, but they're really interested in the designated giving opportunities. And to me, I don't think there's anything to separate the two. And I think our congregation's ready for that to happen. Right? Anything. Yep. Yes. We have both. But we struggled to do online giving because we believe it's a part of worship. And Pastor Mike, we even put together a little were you there Sunday to see that, what Mike did? Oh, you were already on your way up here probably. We have different things we've done. We're going to put 8-week and then repeat those 8 weeks where we're going to incorporate giving into our worship. Because we don't want giving to be just like bill pay online. You know, it is part of worship. Technology has kind of made that harder. So instead of an automatic withdrawal from your checking account where you don't think about it, but maybe once a year, we did something Sunday, and it's one of 8 different things we're going to do to be mindful of worship. So if you're going to continue online giving, we want you in that time to pray about how the Lord would have you do that, how much are you sacrificially, joyfully giving. And so on Sunday, we pulled up on a screen, and we went through 4 different ways that you can give to remind the people, but then we kind of had an offertory without passing a plate. The instrumentalist played a hymn while everyone was in prayer. And so we're just going to keep people mindful on a regular basis because we don't pass an offering plate, which makes it even harder. Online giving is a lot easier to do if you pass an offering plate, but giving can become somewhat of a mindless act of worship if you're not careful. Did that answer? Yeah. You're not. That's exactly what we're talking about, brother. So good. That's a great question. Really, no sweat. Okay? So really, if you look at our budget now, don't let this confuse you. We have 3 different budgets. All that means is we have God's grace, God's blessing, and God's abundance. So we function off the grace budget. So don't let this worry about you. If more comes in than the grace budget, we have it allocated according to our mission statement percentages here. So I told you it's according to our mission statement. It took 6 years to get here, 5 years. In our 6th year, we have the most money going into glory, the second most amount of money going into evangelism, the third most going into edification. So it didn't start that way, right? But 5 years into it, we wanted our budget to look like our mission statement. And so there are some pastors that will look at it and says, well, you should have had equipping more than evangelism because of Ephesians 4, and that's fine. You do whatever you want. This is just our model. You know what I mean? But I will tell you that God's used this. So the more we move along, he's used it. He'll use this new model, which is going to look different than that as we go along. So anyways, we'll move on. Years ago, our people got together, disciple-making people, as we were learning it, and we had something called the Nehemiah team we put together. I think 85 people initially came forward, and this is about what's Grace going to look like in the future as a disciple-making church. And we got all these people. We invited the whole church to come. We wanted the whole church to be part of it, and 85 people stepped forward to be part of it. And we called it the Nehemiah team. And we took the 85 people and we divided them up according to our mission statement. Those of you that were interested in planning on people and places for the future, you meet with Pastor Steve. If you're interested on outreach and evangelism, Pastor Mike's going to be the leader of that team. And if you're interested in equipping, Pastor Kent's going to be the leader of that team. And then we spent weeks together in strategic planning about goals of what Grace Church was going to be able to do as a disciple-making church through 2030. Okay? One of the things that the outreach team, the evangelistic team under Pastor Mike came up with was, how are we going to saturate our Jerusalem with the gospel? Okay? And this is what they came up with. And they just kind of present this to me, to us as elders, and we okay it, and then we go do it. Right? They felt at that point, and this was a blessing to me when I received it, because I could tell that our people were understanding what was most important, right? Personal disciple making was most important. They didn't come up with these things first. Okay? They did present these things, right? Reaching each home in our city every 5 years with the gospel, reaching all 94,200 homes in our county with the gospel every 5 years. They wanted to have a gospel presence at every public venue in our county, fairs, malls, festivals. And they wanted to launch out and do some television commercials. And we actually found a way to get 350 spots a month for $1,000 a month on 6 different channels. So it's not as expensive as you think it would be. But what's really cool is, and we're a long way away since we started. I think we started this like 8 or 9 years ago. But what's really cool is, right, we don't need those things because people are doing this thing, if that makes sense. So for those of you in church planning, or those of you that only believe the way to grow the church is through mass marketing or mass evangelism, that's a way, but we don't think that's the primary way, if that makes sense. So we don't need these. We still do these things, but we don't need them. This is a way for our church to satisfy its ecclesiastical conscience as far as our Jerusalem. You want your people, your disciple-making people will want their consciences satisfied, that they're reaching the community. Every soul is going to have their eyes at least in gospel content, even if they can't meet a person that's saved, right? Disciple-making people become very interested in saturating the gospel with the first layer of Christ's prophecy, which is Jerusalem, their area. Okay? And then they become even more interested. They wanted to branch out into all the counties in Ohio. And then they wanted to somehow figure out every county in the United States, and they wanted to do it together with other like-minded churches. And they wanted to do it together as a church family. Now, are we going to reach this goal by 2030? Probably not. What was our latest tabulation, Jude? I think we had how many churches that they've identified that we can network with? Pardon? Over 650? And that's what's on the map now? Okay. And if there was someone working on this full-time, leading a team full-time, I think we'd be much more farther advanced. But all I'm trying to say is, this is what disciple-making people want to do. I'll just summarize it by saying they want to saturate the world with the gospel in the order in which Christ gave. That's all I can tell you. Right? Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, uttermost parts. And they don't want to do it by themselves. They want to network with like-minded churches to do it. No Lone Ranger, no empire builders, no, thousands of small places doing a big work together. That's what disciple-making people want to do. Right? So then they put this out to you. We want to reach all 43,000 people in Mentor, right? All 88 counties in Ohio, and this stuff they gave to me. United States, all 194 countries and 6 continents. And it is interesting to me how the Spirit of God is waking up interest in this, and people are calling us, and we don't even know who they are. That's all I can tell you. God seems to be wanting something like that. I'm not even spending much time on it at all. But I get a call from a group of pastors in Germany. It's an association of 400 churches in Germany. And they call and they say, hey, look, we know of someone in the country that knows you, and they're telling us what's going on with disciple making, and we want all 400 of our churches to know. And I was supposed to go over there in the fall of 2020, but things were a little shut down. The average size church of those 400 is 90 people. If 90 people in 400 churches, is that 3,600? Or 36,000? 36,000 people. If 36,000 people were Spirit-filled and want to be passionate disciple makers, what would God do in Germany? They're already networked, and none of them are disciple-making churches. I got another call from a pastor in Mumbai. They have a 5,000 pastors conference every year. Can't even wrap my head around that. He's a new missionary there. His name's Nathan. And he came to Grace to a disciple-making seminar when he's home on furlough. And he goes, he takes it back to India and starts to teach it. Word gets out there. He's part of this. He just goes to this gathering as a new missionary over there. And the Cliff's Notes of that is, he becomes part of that pastor's group. They ask him to be on the executive group of this 5,000 group of pastors that gets together every year, and they have a meeting, and they have this passionate desire to figure out what disciple making is in this meeting. Nathan's brand new to this group, and they've had 3 well-known national pastors from the United States come over and preach their annual meeting of 5,000 pastors on what discipleship and disciple-making is. Right? If I mention their 3 names, you guys would know all of them. And, the conclusion is, after all 3 of them, is they get back together in an executive meeting, and Nathan told me they're not satisfied because they didn't really feel that they were told what disciple making is. They preached good messages on different parts of the gospel, on Christ and his ministry, but this well-rounded approach to whole life disciple making they didn't get. Nathan shared with them what you've gone through the last 2 days, and so they called. In the fall of 2021, I was supposed to be there teaching 5,000 pastors disciple making. But then there's this COVID thing. So sometime in 2022 and 2023, there's 400 churches in Germany, 5,000 churches in India, right? we did the seminar in South Africa. And all I'm trying to tell you is I'm going full circle back to what our people gave us. So don't lose track of where I started. Our people, who are disciple-making people, gave us this burden. And we just kept minding our own business, working hard with our hands, studying to be quiet, and just keep moving. And these are things that come to us. Okay? So there's over 5,000 ministry leaders in the United States that have been trained in this way now. Then there's Germany, then there's India. We were in South Africa, and we did a seminar there for some folks from different countries in Africa, mostly South Africa. They asked us to come back, which was supposed to be 2 summers ago. They asked us to come back because they had a group of pastors that wanted to find a handful of men in every country on the continent of Africa, and they wanted to rent out. There's a big Kruger Park down there. Have you ever been there? It's a big safari park. When I was there, they took me on a safari to see animals. Well, they have a bunch of living quarters down there and a big convention center, and they wanted to get pastors from every country in the continent of Africa to come there and learn disciple making together. All I'm trying to say is that's what our people gave us. That's what I'm trying to say. But I will tell you that the more I study disciple making historically, God the Spirit resurrects. He allows the church to be shaken every 35 to 45 years. Right? And those who are alive and remain after the church is sifted, and he's just sifted the church again, right? He's shaken the church again. Those who are alive and remain, they move forward with a renewed interest in living Christ's last words as their first command. That's all I can tell you. It happened about 40 years ago in our country, and it happened in our country 40 years before that, and it happened in our country 40 years before that. And when I go around the world teaching this stuff, they're saying, yeah, we see the same cycles in Bible-believing churches in our country too. Right? God just does this. Right? He allows the church to grow, to wander, to compromise, to struggle, to shake out, to reorganize. And every time they reorganize, there's these cyclical historical patterns of the church being renewed in their interest of what disciple making is. We're just a small portion of that. And I'm running into more and more people across the world doing what we're doing here right now today. Right? So I don't think, if the Lord tarries and we all stay healthy, I really think there could be very easily a global network of like-minded, disciple-making people connected together, aware of each other, especially with technology. I can't see the Apostle Paul spurning the use of technology if it was for gospel progress. I can't ever imagine him doing that. And then this many hands make light work, devoid of individual empire builders. I think we could do some real damage for good. If God can take 11 ordinary men and turn the world upside down with them, I'm not going to stand before the Lord someday and look at the nail prints in his hands and his feet, and scar on his side, and his purifying eyes of fire. I mean, if it is going to be what he's described to be in Revelation chapter 1, there's no way, after I fall down because I pass out because his glory is too much for me to handle, and I muster strength to get back on my knees and shadow my eyes to look up, there's no way I'm looking in his face and looking at those scars. There's no way, God's green earth, that I'm going to look at his face not having lived his why. There's absolutely no way that will be me. So I am trying to make a clean conscience before the Lord for me and then for my people. And it is a struggle because Satan hates that, right? But we must do that. But we need to do it together, okay? All right. So, anyways, we can keep going until I've got to leave here. But we're 10 minutes past our close anyway, right? So, yeah, I can't be late. Thank you, by the way. So, So, disciple-making strategy suggestions. All right, we'll just wrap up with this. It should include the following. This is something that I would ask you ministry leaders to do with your spouses if you're married first. I did this with Rhonda. So this is also taken from Aubrey Malphurst's book called Strategic Disciple Making, just like yesterday's 6-question quiz was. This was one of the hardest things I've ever done with Rhonda, because I answered all these questions by myself before I did it with her, and when I did it with her, she made me feel like a ministry failure. It wasn't as good as I thought it was. So, doing a ministry analysis. Where are we today in your church, right? Even if you haven't started, I think this is a great thing for you guys to do as church planters. Where are we today, right? What do we value? What do we value? After this seminar, you may be rethinking, what do you primarily value? Everything on your value list is valuable, but which one's first? Okay? What are we here for? What is going on where God's put us? What do we know about our community? What do we know about the demographics of our community? What do we know about the percentage of Asians and Spanish-speaking people? What do we know about the number of any demographic? What do we know about the average wage income of our community? What's the primary industry of our community? Right? How many schools are there in our community? Where are they? How many libraries? How many fire stations? How many police stations? We can call this really an environmental scan. With a fine-tooth comb, you're making yourself aware of what is in your community, because there is a who that is working in the what of your community. What about our parks? Why do we want to find out about our parks? Because there's a park director, right? There's a board of park directors. Those are people, right? And then you want to find out your own environmental scan of your own congregation. Where are your people in your community in relationship to what you found that's out in your community? Because remember, if everyone's going to have their own personal Jerusalem passion, everyone's got their own Jerusalem within your Jerusalem. And then we begin to pray for those people in those libraries. We get to pray for those people in those police stations and fire stations. We get to pray for people in those senior citizen centers. Those are the people where we are rubbing shoulders with in the natural rhythms of life. Those are the people where we have a lot of acquaintances instead of redemptive friendships. So we got to pray for those people. So for us in our church, we put together Pastor Mike's team. I didn't bring the bookmarks with me. They have a bookmark that Pastor Mike put together with the Reach team, and it was goals. And by the way, every team, Glory, Reach, and Teach, had 3 goals for each year through 2030 that they were going to accomplish according to our mission statement. So Pastor Mike took this bookmark with his team, and they found out where everyone was and did this environmental scan. And so now we have people taking Christmas gifts to gas station attendants. We have people taking Christmas gifts to local school board offices and fire stations, police stations up the street, convenience stores. They want to know where the people are. And they're not going to know where the people are until they evaluate where the places are. And then when they're driving by those places that have people in them, what are they thinking? They're instead just going through the motions of their day, their soul consciousness they're much more aware. Their why. This is where I go get my coffee every day at McDonald's or Dunkin' or Casey's. I don't go just get my coffee there. Why did God allow me to choose that to be my favorite coffee place? There's a why, there's an eternal why to everything you do. Well, I'm just on the way to work. Doesn't matter. What are you going to work for? You see my point? And if you'll put prayer time into that before you go, God will help you lift up your eyes, and then you pray for opportunities. You'll get them, and then you build one redemptive relationship at a time, very, very slowly. And nothing's in a hurry, and it's okay. All right? Then you can make some plans. Where does God want us to be on our disciple-making journey in 10 years? Man plan God's direct. It's okay to plan. God's going to show you what he really wanted anyway, but plan, right? You got a church plant? Well, we'd like to see 5 people saved in 10 years. Praise God. Start praying that way. He might give you more. If you start for 5 people and you see 5 people saved, your church grew by 100% in 5 years, who's going to be bummed with that? We went from 5 to 10 in 5 years. Oh my word. And it was all through new birth. Right? I know there's some pastors say, you only grew 5 people in 10 years. You're a failure. Not so much. I said yesterday at dinner, I think Colossae at her peak had 25 people in it. As far as I can tell. None of us would have considered, why in the world did Colossae get an inspired book written to them? They only had 25 people. Size doesn't matter, nothing. Right? Living for eternal purpose does, right? So where do we want to be in 10 years? How do we get to where we want to be? How do we do this together as disciple makers? Right? Aubrey Malfors he's an architect. He's an engineer. So he kind of thinks in very compartmentalized ways. But what I appreciate about his book, and it's very thick, at least there's an engineer and architect thinking about spiritual reproductivity, and I think that's kind of rare. So it's a good book. It's a good book to read. Okay? I'm sorry? It is. It is. I'm going to give you a couple books here that aren't on your list that I'm now reading that I think would be really, really helpful to you. All right? So, lasting fruit. This is true for us. I think it'll be true for you. I think you will go from a church, a disciple-making church inside your church. I think you will give birth to new church plants. I don't think there's any reason at all on your 10-year plan in Buffalo, New York, not to include on there your first church plant. For the people who are coming in, spiritual reproductivity from the get-go. We want to plant our first church in 5 years, in 7 years, right? Always keeping our eyes lifted up unto the hills, right? So 2 Timothy 2:2 is happening at our church. I think it'll happen at yours too. It's not only happening for the pastoral positions, but it's happening at other positions. Commit faithful things to faithful men so that they can do likewise. For us pastorally, I'm not going to be at Grace long. I'm only 54. People are saying, why would you do this? Things are going so well. You need to stay. That's not my goal. It's never been my goal. The next team's ready to go. And just like I married 2 of my sons off last year, why would I want to keep my sons living in my basement if they're ready to go? Who does that, right? So I'm proud to marry them. That's a great answer to prayer, decades of prayer, right? And go and be all that Christ wants you to be. I feel the same way with the people that I've had the chance to lead to Christ and disciple and who are pastor-teacher gifts, and now they're ready to go, and they are ready to go. They should be let loose. And I don't think I'm sitting here at 54 years old ready to leave Grace Church of Mentor if we don't have a disciple-making environment developed. I'm going to keep doing the same thing I've always done. I'm going to preach till I'm 65, conventional American retirement time that actually didn't exist before the New Deal, right? Right, and Social Security and all that kind of stuff. Or I'll go till 85 or 95 because I was taught to preach and die in my preaching shoes in the local church God gave me. But we can't do that virtue at the expense of other virtues, right? So literally, in ministry, it's not a pragmatic next man up. It's a glorious next man up. The church needs to embrace that because then the church will embrace their own spiritual reproduction, not just salvifically, but practically. Nursery worker wins someone to Christ. They can train that person to be a nursery worker. Usher, sound person, no matter who, right? The tendency is for those people to become like the people that won them to Christ. So this is spiritual reproduction even to the skill set, the practical level in the local church. This is the sustainability and the perpetuity of the church. It just is. Okay? I told you about this unexpected God-intended blessing of the sons and daughters of ibuprofen. It's changed my pastoral ministry description. I don't counsel anymore. There's no need for us to have a counseling room at Grace Church of Mentor. I was trained in Nouthetic counseling. We got all the licenses and the certificates from, Lafayette, Indiana. We got all that. NANC. I don't think it's called something else now, but what is it? Okay. Yeah. I'm sure it's helpful. I'm sure it's useful. We just don't have it anymore because 99% of our issues are taken care of with our disciplers. If there's a unique special case, our counseling room, like my calendar used to be full. I used to be like a doctor, right? I'll sit, listen, diagnose your problem, and my prescription for you is memorize these verses and meet with me 6 weeks for an hour a week. It's like, and then we'll go through the word and go through dealing with you, and then when we're done, we're done. You're healed. Right? Then what? Just go through it again. It's like a revolving door. Counseling doors are like revolving doors. And ever since disciple making has become a thing, you have to try real hard to continue to struggle. You walk through things together. If we do have a counseling situation, it's typically over something incredibly extreme that the people actually do need common grace professional help with, that I cannot help them with. No one in our church can. If someone needs counseling, it's typically like that now. And that's okay. Right? If it's a spiritual issue, there's a spiritual solution. If it's a biological issue, it's a biological solution. And we'll let common grace do its thing while we continue to shepherd them. All right? But anyways, the kind of people that listen to preaching are different. The way you preach will change. I could have a whole seminar on how my preaching's changed. And necessarily so. And then a national and global network of hundreds of churches working together to plant. That's our Arch Ministries that's come out of Grace. By the way, did you all get the cards to the Young Adult Fellowship in June yesterday? I hope you pray about coming or bringing people with you. It's a great time of fellowship. And we just want to find people. We want to help them, encourage them, give to them, strengthen them. We want to plant with them. That's what our people want to do. Yeah, so here's a little book list. We'll wrap up with this. Evangelism for the Faint-Hearted is out of print. I think you can still find it, though. I think it's the best book to introduce your most shy person in the church to how to build a redemptive relationship in town. Okay? I think it's great. The Lost Art of Disciple Making by Leroy Imes. This is one book of many that will tell you that this resurgence of disciple-making passion happens once a generation. He writes in 1979, 1980, and that's really the last time you see in our country's history people reviewing this with intentionality, right? And 35, 45 years before that was the next time. But Leroy Imes' book, if you read it, I didn't even come across this book until after our disciple-making seminars developed and on its way. And then I read it, and that's when I see other material. I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even need to have this seminar. I just need to give people this book. You know what I mean? So it's there. We were 5-7 years into this disciple-making thing, maybe 10, 12, probably 10, 12. And a guy that we had on our staff, we brought up to teach in Great Lakes Bible Institute, Joel Huffstetler. He walks into my office one day, and he puts Trellis and the Vine on my desk. And he said, "You've read this book, haven't you?" I was like, "No, never seen it before in my life." He goes, "Come on, Tim. You've read this book." I said, no, never seen it in my life. What it's about? And he goes, well, you're doing it here. I was like, oh, doing what here? He goes, this whole disciple-making thing. He said, that's what this book's all about. He said, I thought you read it and you're building your pattern off this book. I was like, Joel, I'm sorry, I've never seen it. I got a trip. I'm going to speak tomorrow. I usually like to read one book a trip. So I said, I'll read this book on that trip. I'm on the flight down to where I'm going. I'm reading through it. I was like, oh, my word, this is so cool. And I'm learning this, relearning this from a couple Anglicans. That's even cooler. Apparently a couple really conservative Anglicans. But the title of the book really tells you what it's about. Most churches have a great trellis. That's their infrastructure. That's their programatization. That's their institutionalization, right? That's their girth doctrinally, theologically. But they don't have a vine growing on it. And what is the vine? It's disciple making. And certainly if you have a trellis, you want it to not be seen because you want it to be absolutely smothered with green growth, right? So it's a great book. Get it. They actually have a practical hands and feet of this called the Vine Project. That kind of talks a lot of practical ways of what we've talked about, how to get something going in your church. True Evangelism, Schaeffer's book. You might not agree totally theologically. I don't either, but that's a great book on prayer and evangelism. The best out there I've ever read. God-Centered Evangelism by Kuyper. Let's make sure that we keep living and preaching and teaching the gospel that God actually gave us and not a man-centered gospel. Dever's book, The Gospel and Personal Evangelism, it's good. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. He's got another book called Discipleship, just simply Discipleship. It's good. I read it. It doesn't land the plane like we have here. Everyone that I've ever heard preach on discipleship, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't land the plane for me into how do I enflesh it for myself and how do I enflesh it to my people. The trellis and the vine does that. Dever stuff really doesn't. Even Bill Hull's stuff doesn't do that for me. And it's not bad stuff. Right? The disciple-making pastor, the disciple-making church, I think it's called. Nothing wrong with all that stuff. But to me, it's got to be enfleshed to our people. So it's good. That's why I put it up here. But just making that qualification. The Power of One-on-One is a great book. Jim Stump is a guy that was part of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He had a particular burden for the Stanford University branch of that. He had a big burden for athletes to be won to Christ. So he went to FCA out at Stanford. And that book's just his story on how he realized that the typical way to do group outreach in a public campus with athletes was not bad, but it wasn't enough. Get them together for some sand volleyball, all-you-can-eat pizza, sit them down in a group, preach the gospel to them, have an invitation, maybe someone will get saved, and then you can disciple them. He said, I did that many, many times, did that, done that, got the t-shirt, and he goes, something else had to happen. Yes? What time is it? Oh, bless your heart. You said that so nicely. Well, you've been here long enough to know. I look at my clock and then I realize we're 15 minutes late for lunch. Okay, read Jim Stump's book. The bottom line is he figured out the best way for him to do was he left FCA and he started his own evangelistic outreach. He found out what coffee shop in Stanford the athletes went to the most. Okay? And he just started going to that coffee shop every morning. And he opened up his Bible and he'd pray. And if an athlete sat next down to him, he'd try to strike up a conversation with them. It's really neat how what God did through that personal, natural rhythm of life thing, what God did. Read the story. It's neat. It's really neat. Like if I was going to be a church planner, that's what I would do. Anyways, Art of Neighboring, Master Plan of Evangelism. I'm going to stand up so he thinks I'm going. That's neat. Robert Coleman, another book that I came across late, way after we were into this. All he does is he takes the Gospels and the life of Jesus, and he examines the number of steps of how Jesus was a disciple maker himself. How he was fulfilling the prophecy that we read in Isaiah 50 yesterday. Great book. Deep Discipleship. This is by J.T. English. My phone redid everything on the update, software update. I was going to look for my books app, and it moved it. I hate that. I have these cool books to tell you to start reading. J.T. English. Deep discipleship. What does he mean by that? That's just taking people who are being discipled and that who have the pastor-teacher gift or the gift of evangelist, people going into full-time vocational ministry, and how to go deeper and wider with them. One-to-one, David Helm, very much like Jim Stunt's book, practical ways about the importance of one and how Jesus even used the number one to ingratiate simple evangelism to people. Great book. Out of the Salt Shaker and Into the World. Have you ever seen Pippert's book? Fantastic book. Get it. There's another book she has as a sequel to that. It's called Stay Salty. Fantastic book. There it is, Stay Salt. All those are good. There's another one. Trying to remember it. I just start play and listen, or I read. Jude, where is my book app? It's just the Apple Books one. This is bumming me out because I really need to tell you. I'm going to text them. I'm going to be late for dinner. Got it. Yeah, it's not on here yet. Write it down if you want, one at a time. It's the idea of here, one-to-one, but it's called one at a time. It's just these, it's Stump's book, The Power of One-on-One, one-to-one, one at a time. You get the deal? There's a lot of people in our culture that are having this reality of disciple making resurrected in their conscience, and none of them are connected. Right? And then we talk about Luke 15 and what it's really good. Kyle Idleman. Okay? There's another book that's excellent. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe you've already. Sorry. The guy who wrote the book is actually the audio speaker of the book, and that was him. This is also Kyle Idleman, Not a Fan. Have you heard that book, Not a Fan? Fantastic book. Fantastic book. Has everything to do, I think, with genuine disciple making. There's another book by Kevin DeYoung called Crazy Busy. Have you ever heard that? Crazy Busy, Kevin DeYoung. This is a great book to put into your pathway under time management for young moms and dads and Christians who are super busy. Best book, short read, 2-hour and 58-minute listen. Okay? So that's all for free. Suggestions. I think that's all for now. There's another one that you can put, fantastic book to put underneath your pathway as far as building a Christian worldview. Once you get into your pathway, maybe you've heard of it, Confronting Christianity. Have you read that? Fantastic book. Fantastic book. I would encourage you in letting your people learn what a biblical worldview is together. All right, let's pray and we'll let you go. Father in heaven, we love you. Thank you for our time together. We pray that you'd use that which was spoken and fellowshipped over in these last 2 days for your glory. We need your help. We need your wisdom. We need your power. to do your will in relationship to these things. And Lord, I pray that you'd build together among us an interdependent local church bond unto eternal purposes more and more as we await your return in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for your patience and your time. And I